Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Reddit ProRevenge. In this episode, you'll hear why a neighbor sells their house over a parking spot, how one person gets back at trashy tenants, why it pays to know your work rights and labor laws, and how a $600 TV cost one company hundreds of thousands of dollars. I hope you stay for all the stories today and subscribe for future videos. This first story is titled, Busybody Stay-at-Home Mom Neighbor Harasses Me Until My Restraining Order Kicks Her Out of Her House. I lived across the street from a very bored stay-at-home mom whose excessive idle time turned her into an insufferable busybody. Her husband backed out of their driveway and slammed into my roommate's car parked on the curb. He apologized, gave us his insurance information, and took care of it. He was never a problem because he accepted responsibility for what he did. His wife, however, demanded that we never park cars on the curb again because, she claimed, they couldn't get out of their driveway otherwise. The street was very wide, and parking there was not a problem at all. She was simply unable to accept that the accident was her husband's fault and believed we were somehow responsible for it, therefore making us responsible for preventing it in the future. We told her that we would avoid parking there whenever possible, but we still had the legal right to park on the street. We added that, if necessary, we would still do so, and it was her and her husband's responsibility to avoid hitting other people's legally parked cars when backing out of their driveway. She wasn't happy with that answer but told us we'd better stay clear of that parking spot and stormed off. One day she came storming over, banging on our front door, yelling us out. We caught her on the security camera saying, "If you don't move that car in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to total it with my truck. It'll be your fault, and you'll have to pay for the damage to my vehicle." To this I simply responded, "I don't know whose car that is, but I didn't park it there. I have you on camera, so if you do anything to that car, I'll have to call the police and hand over this recording." She then threatened to sue me for invasion of privacy for recording her and still insisted that we move the car, even though it wasn't ours. We ignored her, and she didn't do anything to the car. We kept the recording though. A few weeks later, I had a friend visit from out of town. He parked his car on the curb and started unloading some of his stuff from the trunk. She came storming out, screaming and yelling at him, saying, "I've told you repeatedly to never park your car on the curb. If you don't move it, I'm going to total it, and you can pay for a new car as well as the damage you do to mine." He tried to calm her down and asked if there was somewhere else he could park. She replied, "You can park it in heck because that's where you'll be after I'm done with you." Unfortunately for her, he had his dash cam running the whole time, and it recorded her voice saying everything. He called the police, and she was arrested for threatening to commit vandalism. A few days later, she left a long-winded hate letter in our mailbox. It was written as if it were an open letter from the entire neighborhood, basically stating that nobody knows who we are, everyone wishes we'd move away, and nobody wants us living in our neighborhood. The thing is, she forgot about the security cameras. I took the video of her opening my mailbox, which included her taking all our letters out and rifling through them, and I gave it to the post office. This led to her getting arrested for the second time that week. After that, we used her 2 arrests, our collection of security and dashcam footage, and her letter to get a restraining order against her that actually prohibited her from entering her own home. We called the police every time we saw her because she was in violation of the order. She ended up having to live in a hotel room. Her husband came over, apologized to us, and asked if we would drop the restraining order so his wife could come home. I told him that I would do it, but only if she wrote me, my wife, our roommates, and the friend of mine that she threatened a 1-page apology for her harassment and promised to never contact us again for any reason whatsoever moving forward. I received no apology, and the house went on the market a week later. This next story is titled, Trashy Tenants Moved Out of Parents' Property in the Middle of the Night. A few months later, I got them on social media. Tenants on the trashy side had been living at my parents' property for a while. After a cash windfall, they decided it was time to move out. Fine, whatever. They started complaining about the place, claiming it was filled with mold, and began being late on rent. They wanted to take us to court. They never showed up to court, which elongated the process, so they ended up basically living for free in our house while taking us to court for poor living conditions. I know, right? A few months went by until they had to go to court. One of them showed up, crying that their baby was dying because of the mold and so on. The judge went in on her, saying, "You've been living there rent-free for over 6 months. If your baby's sick, why don't you leave?" We also had a mold inspector come in and examine the house, and he basically said, "It's not mold that's giving your kid breathing problems, it's your cigarette smoke." The case was thrown out, and they had to back pay 3 months' rent. Literally that night they got a U-Haul and left town. I followed their every move on Instagram, knowing that they were eventually going to slip up. A few weeks went by and they started posting pictures of their house and such. Eventually they put a location on one of their pictures and we saw the house numbers and recognized the neighborhood. Bad move, honey, bless your heart. We got on Google Earth, found the street, and confirmed the actual house by matching the red door to one of their pictures. I sent it to a lawyer, they got served, and the guy had to sell his vintage car to pay us back. This third story is titled, Take My Cruise Pay? Let me introduce you to the Wage Theft Prevention Act. I work in the television industry as a freelancer. It essentially means that I get hired by various production companies to work on 1 or 2 shows, and then I leave to find another job somewhere else. This works out great most of the time and allows me to take quite a bit of time off between shows if I need it. But every now and then, I just need a quick gig while I wait for a better gig to start pre-production. I ended up taking a gig with a terrible little company in New York that had 1 show on a small network. To sum it up, they were disrespectful people who had no idea what they were doing. My team and I ended up quitting the show after getting fed up with the disrespect and shadiness of the production company. We happily started the next gig at a much better production company in Los Angeles. Then I started getting phone calls from the production assistants, who are the lowest paid people on the crew, saying that they hadn't gotten paid. We immediately emailed the production company in New York and were lied to, given fake tracking numbers for checks that were supposedly sent out, and so on. After 30 days, I instructed each and every production assistant to file a claim with the labor board. The employees are liable for the daily rate owed for every day they do not pay, up to 30 days. At the end of the day, we had 7 production assistants with a claim of $21,500 each. They all won their cases, and I haven't seen that production company pop up in years. This 4th story is titled, Damage My TV in Transit and Deny the Claim. No more shipments for you. I'm not sure if this is pro-quality, but some have asked me to post it here since they think it is. 10 years ago, I moved from my job. I'd forgotten about one of my TVs back home and asked my dad to ship it to me on my company's account since they paid for the move. A couple of days later, the delivery driver from shipping company A dropped it off. The box was heavily damaged, so I didn't sign for it. He waited while I plugged it in, and to no one's surprise, it was damaged. He said he could take it back if I didn't want to sign for it, and the shipper could file the claim. I informed him that I was the shipper and would file it myself. This was a small mistake, but I've shipped thousands of parts through this company, so I figured it wouldn't be a problem. The claim was denied a month later. This went back and forth for a couple of months with multiple emails to this old lady, and she didn't care at all. She was also very rude to me via email and phone. Now, shipping company A has 2 separate entities, parcel and freight. We solely use this freight company for all our warehouses across the United States. I cut them off at my new store and started using company B. It only took a month before the salesman from shipping company A stopped by. When he showed up and asked why he was losing $20,000 worth of freight a month, I informed him of the $600 broken TV from his sister company a couple of months back. He said that he couldn't do anything about it since it was a separate side of their company and begged for the business back. No dice. This went back and forth for several months. Our average was $20,000 to $25,000 a month they would bill us for, and it was a small town, so they were very upset that it was over a $600 TV. I got a check in the mail about 1 year after I shipped the TV, along with a letter from their vice president. So, I guess this is the pro part. Fast forward a couple of years and I've been promoted within the company to make certain decisions, and one happens to be logistics. None of our locations use shipping company A. Some months we spend well over $100,000, and this has been going on for several years now. We also inform customers to use shipping company B since shipping company B is awesome, and they treat us very well. Since about 2011, we've used them countrywide. There's no telling how much shipping company lost over a $600 TV. This 5th story is titled How I Inadvertently Brought Down a Crime Ring. Strap in, this is fairly long. This all happened in 2008 when I was 18. I had just gotten a job at a new restaurant. The owner of the restaurant, whom we'll call Ken, was an immigrant from Syria. Ken had spent most of his life in the States, managing restaurants in Boston, but moved to our area to help some of his family with their struggling business. In the beginning, things were going well. We had a steady flow of customers and some pretty good food. About a month in, however, things shifted. Ken bought a new Mercedes and a house. I thought nothing of it. He had just moved to the area 2 months prior. Then things got bad. He closed on his house and made his employees move everything for him. Servers, dishwashers, bussers, everyone. He said if we didn't, we'd be fired, so we did. He then started taking vacations and leaving the head chef, who was a horrible cook, in charge. The chef was overwhelmed and just told us to get out of his face when we had an issue. Fast forward 4 months, and Ken was now not paying employees. We started losing a lot of help. It was almost the end of summer, and in a few weeks, I'd be quitting for college anyway, so I stuck it out. I started working 13 to 16-hour shifts 6 days a week, which he promised me good money for. I was, at this point, promoted to head of the house and got a raise, even though I wasn't being paid. I worked for about 3 weeks that way, around 84 to 96 hours a week at $15 an hour. I then learned that one of my friends there, a Mexican here on a work visa, had not been paid for over a month. He told me he was afraid of quitting because he didn't want to lose his visa and have to go back to Mexico, as Ken told him that he'd report him right away to immigration. I was livid. I took my uniform off and stormed to the front area where Ken was. It was our dinner rush, but I didn't care. I demanded payment for the last 3 weeks, which was around $3,600 on the spot. He blew up in front of everyone. Normally I'm passive and would back down, but not today. I was angry. I told him that if he didn't pay me, I was calling the health board, the labor board, the IRS, since we were getting paid under the table, and that the police would have the place shut down the next day. He paid me the next day. I called the immigration office in our area and explained our dishwasher's situation to see if they could help. I set up a meeting with them for him. I picked him up and away we went. When we got there, they asked if I could just fill out a statement to add to his file. Sure. I wrote everything. A few days later, I looked outside to see Ken being handcuffed and put into the back of a squad car, with a health department representative there. I walked over to see what was going on. Ken was previously being investigated for fraud, and my statement was the evidence that pushed the investigation over the edge. I read in the paper some months later about it. In the raid, they found his ledger, which showed how much money he'd been skimming from the business, over 6 figures, and he was charged for that. Ken was getting deported back to Syria, and the rest of the sister restaurants were getting shut down pending further investigation. They never reopened. So, this is the story about how a fresh 18-year-old inadvertently brought down a minor crime ring in my area because I was angry that they took advantage of a friend. This 6th is titled, Measure Wrong and Blame It on the Customer. Prepare to lose a 6-figure client. Hi everyone! This isn't my ProRevenge, but my builders from about 15 years ago when they were building my house. The architect for our house was insistent on sash windows, and the only maintenance-free sash windows available in my country at the time were only available from one manufacturer. Now, this manufacturer had a very stuck-up and slippery sales representative who insisted on doing all the measurements by himself, including the custom bay window. This representative also dropped off a couple of demo windows to show off and left them with our builder on site for a few weeks. If you're not familiar, brick construction in the UK comprises an inner cinderblock wall and an external wall, creating a cavity for insulation. This becomes important later. The windows turned up at the construction site, and the builders got around to fitting them. All of them went in fine apart from the bay window. It didn't fit. The guy had measured the internal cinderblock wall and not the external brick. This meant the window was slightly small. My angry builder phoned the sales representative and told him that the window was the wrong size and that they needed to supply a new one. The sales representative turned into a jerk and blamed our builder, saying they supplied the wrong dimensions. Their arguing went back and forth, but the sales representative didn't budge. Our builder had no other choice than to buy another window since all the other windows were paid for and fitted at this point. These windows were expensive, and the builder was very angry. Now, this is where the revenge comes in. At this point, the sales representative still hadn't collected his demo window, and our builder wanted revenge on the sales representative. Our builder got one of the guys to grab some silicone bathroom sealant. He opened the windows, filled the seams full of the stuff, then closed the window, basically gluing it shut. The sales representative eventually collected his demo window so he could show it off to a potential client. One of the selling points of these windows was that you could open them with one finger. Now, imagine the sales representative in front of a potential customer, failing to open the window with one finger. Now, imagine the sales representative trying to open the window with all of his strength, and it's still not opening. Karma served! The upset sales representative eventually figured out that the builder sealed the windows shut. He then called our builders, screaming at them, going on about how he just lost a $450,000 contract to supply windows to a new building development. The builders at this point were in hysterics, and the upset sales representative threatened to sue them. They never heard a word from the sales representative in the end. The moral of the story is, own up to your mistakes. This seventh is titled, The Wrath of the Stoner Art Student. A couple of years ago, my dad had a security system installed that came with 2 cameras set up, one pointed at the side in the driveway and one pointed at the street by the front door, where you can see the cars. It has an app that we installed on our phones that can give us alerts. I also have a shed, and I asked my parents if I could use it for most of my art, as it gets messy. I would always clean up after myself, but paint still stains the carpets, and if I had to smell that tangerine floor cleaner one more time, I was going to vomit. I fixed it up a bit. It still looks junky, but it's mine. It took about 2 weeks to set up. We also have a problem with people going through cars a lot, like ridiculously so. I have a junky Ford Tempo that I never kept anything important in, so I didn't care. As I said, I have an art shed, and I'm a student in the visual communication program at my local college. My professor had given us our term assignment, which was basic but fun. Pick a piece that was in the textbook and either write a 10-page essay on it or do a recreation with a 2-page blurb of how you copied the techniques, yada yada. I was stoked because Van Gogh was covered in there, and I wanted to do a piece called Café Terrace, as it's a gorgeous piece. I put a lot of time and effort into this thing and smoked a lot of weed while doing it. But one night, my phone gave me an alert from the security system while I was at a small party. I saw a blurry image of 3 teens running past my side door. I thought it was odd, but I wasn't home to check it out immediately. When I got home, driven by a friend from the party, I got back to see my car door ajar and rolled my eyes because it's annoying but not new. But then I remembered the alert on my phone and went to check around the house. I checked the shed last because there's a lock on it. It'll be fine, right? I live in Canada. Who's going to break into my shed? When I got to the shed, it was trashed. Paint was on the ground, the material that I hung up over the ceiling was ripped and burnt, and all works of art I put on the wall were ripped down. My paint was everywhere and my pastels were stomped on. They even broke my little lousy stool that I nicknamed Hermit. But the worst was that my term project was destroyed, cut apart and repeatedly smashed with my bong, my 9mm glass beaker bong that I got as a present, and this was 2 weeks before I had to turn that project in, the Revenge. I was able to get a week's extension as I emailed my professor and sent him photos, including the security alerts, and contacted the police about the destruction of my property. Cleanup was a couple of days, and I did manage to turn my project in on time without the extension by just not going to sleep. The first one was better, but hey, I was still angry though. I kept thinking of ways to catch them or lure them in and scare the junk out of them. So I left some money in my car's console, left my doors unlocked, and at the front of the house I turned on the camera. I kept a bat in the shed and by the side door. No guarantee that it'll be the same punks, but I kept hoping. A few people picked my car, but it wasn't those punks, so I waved it off. A month later, and a few days after my final exams, I'm in the shed at 2 a.m, smoking and sketching something, when the alert goes off. It's the front camera, and I see 3 familiar-looking blurs ransacking my car. I grabbed the bat, and before I set out, I heard them coming toward my shed. I flicked the string of lights off, and I let them get closer before I jumped out with my bat in hand. One of them screamed so loud before they booked it, and I ran after them, trying to scare them away. I'm a bad runner, and I fully expected them to outpace me, but one of them cut across my front lawn and slipped on the wet grass. He biffed it, and I caught up to him. I grabbed him by the back of his hoodie with the bat, threatening him. I asked, "Were you the ones that trashed my shed? What's your name, Matthew?" His name was not Matthew. I said, "Give me your wallet." This dude threw it, and I let go of him to retrieve it, and he ran off. Whatever. I pocketed my $5 plus what I'm assuming was another $40 of stolen money. I took a look at his wallet, and his high school ID with his real name was there. I Facebooked his mom and told her what happened and emailed the school as well, mentioning that I was a previous student there and that I was devastated that this is how the school teaches children. The mom turned up at my door with another mom, an older dude, and the 3 punks. They had to apologize to me in person, and then one of the moms said, "We'll make sure they get what they deserve," whatever that means. Isn't that nice? Alright guys, a lot of you have been commenting that I throw my opinions out after each story, so here they are at the very end, of course. For the first story, I quite enjoyed this pro-revenge and actually feel bad for the husband. I had a similar situation like this happen to me before, where people actually think that street parking in front of their house belongs to them. In fact, in a lot of places, street parking in front of your house is fair game for any vehicle, and it's first come, first serve. I'm pretty sure that woman is completely nuts. For the second story, I think it's unfortunate that sleazy people like this exist. Some people just try to find the smallest things to inconvenience others and try to put themselves on top, which makes me think about the cash windfall that they received. Judging by what they did to the landlords, they may have actually faked a slip and fall in a supermarket to get a bunch of money. I also feel bad for the children who lived in the house that was full of cigarette smoke. I hope they're not dying from the cigarette smoke. For the third story, sometimes the best revenge is actually knowing your rights. Good on these guys for taking action on this sleazy production company. It's a pretty big oof for a company that pretended to have paid for work being done, only to give out fake tracking numbers for fake checks. They ended up having to pay about $21,000 each to 7 workers. They should have just paid them in the first place. For the fourth story, shipping company, it totally sounds like they offer horrible customer service. If you're a company offering a delivery service, you're getting paid to take someone's personal belongings from point A to point B in the condition they were in. If there are any damages along the way caused by employees or anything accidental, you're 100% liable for it. The fact that they didn't do anything about it and allowed it to carry on for months with no resolution until consequences came along, I'd say they deserved it. For the fifth story, this story is a slow burn that builds into something unexpectedly powerful. What starts as a frustrating job turns into a real-life whistleblower tale. I appreciated the narrator's growth, from passive to assertive, and their moral compass in standing up for a vulnerable coworker. The ending is satisfying, especially knowing the bad guy faced real consequences. It shows how one act of courage can ripple into systemic justice. Very cinematic and well-paced. For the sixth story, this was classic petty revenge with a professional twist. The builder's creativity and silent vengeance felt justified, especially since the sales rep refused to own up to his mistake. The ending, where the representative embarrasses himself in front of a major client, is karma in motion. It felt like the perfect David versus Goliath moment, only in the world of window fittings. For the last story, this story was equal parts heartbreaking and hilarious. The destruction of the art shed felt genuinely painful, especially because it was such a personal space, but the narrator's recovery and DIY justice were incredibly satisfying. The fact that the revenge involved a Facebook message to a kid's mom was chef's kiss. It felt very real, very human, and oddly empowering. Well, that's it for this episode of our ProRevenge series. Thanks for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the stories, be sure to leave a comment and hit that like button. If you aren't subscribed, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss future stories. See you guys in the next one!